On a cold January night in Paris, the kind of night when the Seine lies still as black glass, and the street lamps blur through the fog, the Louvre Museum stood as it always had, an immovable fortress of art history and human achievement. Yet behind the massive stone walls, in galleries that had been silent for centuries after closing hours, something stirred. Security cameras recorded nothing unusual. Guards did their rounds as they always did. But by morning, several priceless artifacts, pieces so rare that even experts hesitated to touch them, were simply gone. No alarms, no forced entry, just empty spaces where history itself had been displayed. The disappearance of artifacts from the Louvre is not in itself impossible. Museums have suffered thefts before, and Paris has known its share of brilliant criminals. But this case was different. The exhibits in question were not paintings or jewels, but relics few people knew existed. A Mesopotamian statuette said to carry a curse, a fragment of papyrus rumored to contain lost verses of the Book of the Dead, and an obsidian mirror once owned by an occultist in the 1500s. Items not normally shown to the public, locked away in a restricted wing of the museum. How anyone even knew of their existence was a mystery. The first guard to discover the loss was Antoine Dupuis, a man who had worked night security for 15 years without incident. He swore that when he'd checked the restricted gallery at midnight, everything had been in place. But at dawn, when he returned, the glass cases were open, empty, and cold to the touch, as though the objects had never been there. The strangest part was that the locks were intact. The cases weren't broken. It was as if the objects had simply vanished. The Louvre immediately closed off the wing. Detectives from the Brigade de Répression du Banditisme were called in, specialists in art theft. They questioned every guard, reviewed every camera feed, and examined every inch of the floor for footprints. They found nothing. Not a fingerprint, not a strand of hair, not even a shadow out of place. Yet something else unsettled them. Several guards reported strange sensations during their rounds the previous night. Whispers in empty corridors, sudden drafts of cold air, and, in one case, the sound of footsteps behind them when no one was there. Antoine admitted, in a shaky voice, that at around 3 a.m., he thought he saw a figure standing at the end of the gallery, a tall, thin man in black. But when he turned on his flashlight, the figure dissolved into the shadows. The museum tried to keep these details quiet, but whispers spread quickly among staff. Some spoke of a curse. Others recalled rumors that the Louvre's underground storage, where thousands of unexhibited artifacts are kept, had its own haunted history. After all, the museum had once been a medieval fortress, a place of imprisonment and executions. Bones had been discovered in its foundations. People said not all of its residents had ever truly left. Detectives were under pressure from the French government. The disappearance of even one priceless artifact would have been a scandal. The loss of several at once, with no explanation, threatened to shake public trust in one of the world's greatest institutions. They brought in consultants, historians, cryptographers, even a psychologist, to examine the theft from every angle. One of these consultants was Dr. Elise Moreau, an expert in ancient civilizations. She was called in because she had previously catalogued the papyrus fragment that was missing. When she saw the empty case, she turned pale. "This isn't about theft," she whispered. "It's about release." No one understood what she meant at first. She explained that the papyrus was part of a funerary text designed not just to guide the dead into the afterlife, but to bind certain spirits to silence. Without it, those spirits might not remain quiet. The statuette, too, was said to contain a fragment of a Mesopotamian deity, a figure associated with storms and destruction. The mirror was infamous for its history of owners who had all met grim ends. Elise suggested that together, these objects might have served as a kind of lock, a balance of forces contained within the museum. The detectives were skeptical, but that night, something happened that made them listen more closely. At 2:17 a.m., the Louvre's fire alarm went off in the restricted wing. Guards rushed in, expecting smoke or flames. Instead, they found the gallery filled with a thick, unnatural mist. It clung to the floor, swirling in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The temperature had dropped nearly 10 degrees. Cameras inside the gallery went white with static, and in the mist several guards swore they saw movement. A shadow slipping between displays. Too tall, too silent, too wrong. When the mist cleared, nothing was damaged. But Antoine, the veteran guard, was found unconscious on the floor. He had no injuries, no sign of trauma, but his face was twisted into an expression of pure terror. When he finally woke in the hospital hours later, he couldn't speak. His vocal cords were intact, but he seemed incapable of forming words. All he did was scribble one phrase over and over on a notepad: "It is awake." Word of this spread beyond the museum walls. Reporters sniffed out the story, though officials tried to downplay it. The public was told that minor artifacts had been misplaced, that nothing of significance was missing. But those close to the investigation knew better. The exhibits weren't misplaced. They were taken, and not in any way that made sense. Dr. Moreau began her own quiet investigation. She stayed late in the museum, poring over old records, blueprints, and journals of past curators. What she found disturbed her. The 3 missing items had never been meant for display. They had been acquired decades earlier under unusual circumstances, hidden away by curators who understood their danger. The statuette was taken from a dig in Iraq, where several archaeologists had gone missing. The papyrus had been smuggled from Egypt by a man who later killed himself under mysterious circumstances. The mirror was donated anonymously, its provenance untraceable. Why had they all vanished now? One night, Elise was studying the museum's archives when she heard something, faint but unmistakable. A whisper in the dark speaking her name. She froze, convinced it was her imagination. But then the whisper grew louder, closer, echoing off the stone walls. She gathered her papers, hurried out, and nearly tripped down the stairs in her haste. She later swore that as she fled, she caught sight of a reflection in one of the glass doors. Her own face, but distorted, watching her with a smile she wasn't making. Meanwhile, the detectives received an anonymous message, a letter, written in precise handwriting, delivered without a trace. It read, "You cannot protect what was never yours. The objects return to their master. Leave them be, or the Louvre will not be the only place that suffers." There was no signature, only a symbol, an eye surrounded by flames. As investigators scrambled to understand the threat, strange phenomena began spreading beyond the museum. Residents near the Louvre reported hearing chanting at night, voices carried on the wind that spoke in no language they recognized. A cafe owner swore the lights in her shop flickered at exactly 3 a.m. every night, always followed by the sound of knocking on her locked door. Tourists reported feeling watched while taking photos near the glass pyramid, some even capturing faint shapes in their pictures. Elongated figures, blurry but unnervingly human. By the end of the week, 3 guards had quit, refusing to return. Antoine remained hospitalized, still mute, his eyes hollow. The detectives had reached a dead end. The artifacts were gone, their trail colder than the mist that had appeared in the gallery. And yet, deep in the museum's labyrinthine storage, in places where even staff seldom went, lights flickered on at night. Shadows moved where no shadows should be. Dr. Moreau realized something terrifying. The theft was not a crime of greed, but of ritual. The objects had not been stolen to be sold, but to be used. Together they might form a gateway, a conduit, or a key. She began piecing together their histories, finding fragments of myths that spoke of doors between worlds, of bargains with gods better left forgotten. But she was running out of time. Because each night, the disturbances grew stronger. Each night, the Louvre felt less like a museum and more like a threshold. And on the 10th night after the disappearance, something crossed it. In the restricted gallery, where the glass cases still stood empty, a camera recorded a figure entering at exactly 3:03 a.m. It was tall, thin, and featureless, draped in shadows. It moved without sound, without light, and as it passed, the cameras failed. The footage showed only static, then silence. When the lights returned, the gallery was different. A phrase was scrawled across the wall in what looked like ash. "Not yours to keep." The message was clear, but what it meant and who or what had delivered it remained a mystery. The Louvre had lost more than artifacts. It had lost control of something it never should have possessed, and the world outside was beginning to feel the consequences. The morning after the message appeared on the Louvre's gallery wall, the museum was sealed off. The French government declared a matter of national security, though the statement was vague. Behind closed doors, panic spread. Not only had priceless artifacts vanished, but something, human or not, was mocking them. Director Etienne Girard, exhausted, slammed his fist on the table. "This is not about art. This is about France's reputation. We cannot allow talk of curses." Dr. Elise Moreau shook her head. "With respect, Director, this is about containment. These objects weren't supposed to be here. Whoever took them knows what they are, and I fear they've begun using them." Inspector Marcel Duval, unlike the others, leaned forward. He had seen Antoine's desperate notes, heard the strange mist. "Dr. Moreau, what do you believe these objects are meant to do?" Elise laid out drawings: a statuette of Pazuzu, demon of storms, a papyrus restraining spirits, and an obsidian mirror linked to communication with the beyond. Taken separately, dangerous curiosities. Together, a ritual conduit, a door. That night, Duval brought Elise through the restricted gallery. Empty glass cases gleamed under fluorescent light. Then Elise felt it. The air thickened, lights flickered, and a low hum rose from below. "The foundations," Duval whispered. The Louvre stood on medieval tunnels few dared enter. Now chanting drifted from the depths. They descended. The hum grew louder. From behind an iron door, light leaked, then cut out, leaving silence. The following day, a tourist photo went viral. A skeletal silhouette behind the Louvre pyramid. Denials only fueled speculation. Soon, strange events plagued Paris. Animals behaving erratically, power outages at 3 a.m., mirrors shattering in homes. Convinced, Duval assembled a small team, Elise and 2 loyal guards. They entered the forgotten tunnels. Dust, dripping stone, the smell of rust. In one chamber, they found a flaming eye carved centuries ago with Latin beneath. "Non aperius ianuam." Do not open the door. In another, fresh wax ink symbols, a circle of ash, clear signs of ritual. "Someone's performing ceremonies down here," Elise whispered. Then came footsteps. They hid. A hooded man emerged with a lantern and a heavy cloth bundle. He placed it on a stone pedestal, the mirror. Chanting began. Shadows stretched unnaturally and the mirror rippled like liquid. Elise grabbed Duval's arm. "We need to stop him." The man turned, as if aware of their presence. "You shouldn't be here." In the mirror, Elise glimpsed a pale face with void eyes. A freezing wind surged, their lights died, panic erupted. Gunshots echoed. When beams flickered back, the man was gone. Only the mirror pulsed faintly. They fled. Girard dismissed their story, but Elise and Duval knew better. The artifacts were tools for a ritual of immense power, and the mirror was a window. That night, Elise dreamed of endless black water swallowing the Louvre. Eyes opened in the depths. She woke screaming. The next morning, one of the guards from the tunnels was found dead, his face frozen in terror. On his bathroom mirror, written in condensation, "We are coming." Elise warned Duval. If the papyrus is used, the ritual completes. Soon after, footage surfaced from Notre Dame, a robed figure bowing before glowing papyrus. The hooded man again. The stage had moved beyond the Louvre. Across Paris, shadows lengthened unnaturally. Strange symbols appeared overnight. People dreamed of mirrors and voices. Every night at 3:03 a.m., the Louvre's lights cut out for exactly 3 minutes. 3:03 is when the barrier is weakest, Elise explained. If they succeed, this won't stop with Paris. Duval asked the only question left. How do we stop it? Elise swallowed. We return. To the mirror. To the source. Because the artifacts were never stolen for profit, They were taken to open a door, and that door was nearly ready to be unlocked when Dr. Elise Moreau and Inspector Marcel Duval descended once more into the bowels of the Louvre. It felt different than before. The tunnels were alive. The stone walls trembled faintly as if something vast moved beneath the earth, and the air hummed with vibrations that seemed to rattle their bones. The guards who had agreed to accompany them clutched their weapons tighter than ever, their eyes darting at every shadow. They weren't going down to investigate anymore. They were going down to confront. The passages led them to the chamber where they had last seen the hooded figure and the obsidian mirror. But now, the mirror no longer pulsed faintly. It glowed, black but radiant like an open wound in reality. Around it were fresh markings, symbols drawn in chalk, candles still burning, and bones scattered like offerings. The guards raised their rifles instinctively, but Elise raised her hand. Bullets won't matter here. As they entered, a whisper rose from the mirror, curling like smoke in the air. At first it was unintelligible, but soon it became words, layered in many voices. Come closer, look within. Duval gritted his teeth. It's bait, don't look. But one of the guards did. Just a glance. He froze mid-step, his flashlight clattering to the floor. His eyes went wide, glassy, and his lips moved silently. A moment later, he dropped dead without a sound, his face twisted in terror. The others dragged him back, horrified, but Elise forced herself not to look at the surface. Instead, she examined the ritual circle. Among the bones, she found fragments of papyrus burned into ash, the stolen verses. Her worst fear was confirmed. They were already being read, their power unleashed. Suddenly, a voice boomed behind them. You should not have come. The hooded figure stepped out of the shadows, lantern in hand, mirror light painting his robes. His hood slipped slightly, revealing a pale, gaunt face marked with strange symbols carved into the flesh. His eyes were voids, like pools of ink. Who are you? Duval demanded, aiming his weapon. The man's lips curled into something that was almost a smile. A servant, a herald. You chase thieves and criminals, Inspector, but this is older than your laws, older than your city. These artifacts were never meant to gather dust in a museum. They are keys, and keys exist to open doors. Elise's voice trembled but held firm. What door? What have you done? The man spread his arms. A door to the other side, to what waits beneath, to what has been silenced for too long. The Louvre was built on old ground, sacred ground. You dug up bones, you locked away gods, you buried secrets. Now they rise again. The mirror flared, rippling as though stirred by unseen hands. For an instant, a pale hand pressed against the glass from within, fingers too long, nails sharp like obsidian. Duval fired. The shot rang like thunder. The bullet hit the mirror and vanished into its surface with no effect. The hooded man laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. You cannot fight it with metal, he said. You cannot fight it at all. Then the chanting began again, but not from him. From the mirror itself, hundreds of voices, screaming and whispering at once, filling the chamber until the guards clutched their ears in pain. Elise realized the ritual was reaching its end. If the mirror fully opened, whatever pressed against it would step through. She shouted over the noise. The papyrus verses, they weren't just for restraint. They can also seal. If I can reconstruct them, Duval grabbed her shoulder. How? I memorized enough. I can try. The hooded man turned, fury flashing in his hollow eyes. You will not stop this. He raised his arms, and the chamber shook violently. Stones fell from the ceiling. The candles flared blue. The mirror began to crack, not like breaking glass, but like a cocoon splitting open. From within, shapes moved. Elise fell to her knees, clutching her notebook, scribbling the verses she had studied for years. She began to recite, her voice trembling but growing louder with each word. The mirror pulsed angrily, the shapes inside thrashing against its surface. The hooded man screamed, lunging toward her, but Duval tackled him, slamming him into the stone wall. The two men struggled, the inspector fighting with desperate strength against something more than human. The man's flesh was cold, his strength unnatural, but Duval refused to let him reach Elise. Her voice echoed, words of binding, words of silence. The chamber's air thickened, the whispers from the mirror turning to shrieks. The hand pressing from within twisted violently as though it were burning. The hooded man howled, his body convulsing. "You don't know what you unleash. You'll trap it, but not forever. It will find another way." Duval slammed his fist into the man's face, silencing him. Elise finished the incantation with a cry that reverberated through the stone. The mirror exploded in a burst of black light, shattering into fragments that dissolved into dust before they touched the ground. The chanting ceased. The hum stopped. Silence filled the chamber. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Elise collapsed, gasping for breath. Duval staggered to her side, helping her up. The remaining guard looked around in terror. The hooded man was gone, not dead, not wounded. Simply gone, as if swallowed by the air. "Is it over?" Duval asked. Elise shook her head weakly. "No, contained, yes, for now. But those artifacts were never destroyed. They were conduits. Whoever he was just a servant. There will be others." They returned to the surface with nothing but ashes and fear. The official report stated that the stolen artifacts had been destroyed in a confrontation with smugglers. The public was told nothing of mirrors or rituals. The Louvre reopened weeks later, the empty cases quietly removed. But Paris was not the same. People still whispered of strange shadows near the museum. Mirrors in the city occasionally rippled faintly, just for a second, when no one touched them. And some nights, when the moon was hidden and the Seine ran black, faint chanting could be heard beneath the streets. Elise left her post at the university and vanished from public life. Some say she moved to the countryside, others that she devoted herself to private research. Inspector Duval remained in Paris, but he never spoke of the incident again. Those who knew him noticed he never kept mirrors in his home. As for Antoine, the mute guard, he never recovered his voice. But months later, a nurse at his hospital swore she found something strange in his room. He had drawn a picture over and over in his notebook, an eye surrounded by flames. The symbol had not disappeared with the mirror. It remained etched into stone deep below the Louvre, waiting. And sometimes, in the stillest hours of the night, long after the last visitor has left, when the museum stands silent beneath the Paris sky, the guards swear they feel it watching them. The empty gallery, the stones beneath their feet, the weight of centuries pressing in. Something still lingers, because doors, once opened, are never truly closed. And the Louvre, Paris itself, still stands on the threshold.